You guessed it. Sitting on his porch up there was Teydis. And he couldn't see what was going on, but he was sitting there on the back porch still stewing over his bad event of before. And then he began to hear these sounds, and he wondered, what is that? Either somebody's in pain or somebody's in ecstasy. He didn't know. And it was a man. What was a man? What was going on? He wondered. He hadn't heard sounds like that since the days when he was married to Marianne. And he was the one making the sounds. He was really beginning to wonder. He thought, I'm going to listen. Maybe I should record this. Now, I need to explain a little bit about Teydis. As I said before, he's a real a piece of work. It's going to take a long time to explain about him. But, one of the things he mumbled to himself was, "Honey, sweet." And that was, what an odd thing to say. Well, if I tell you the background of that, it might help to understand Teydis a little bit. You don't even know what he looks like yet, and that can wait. I'll just tell you, he was kind of a big guy. He was bald, had a real fair complexion. You don't need to know that. But back to this honey sweet. It was an expression that he used. Wedge would have called it an idiolect. It was a perfect example of an idiolect because he was the only one that used it. And if I tell you where that came from, as I say, you'll understand him a little bit better. He all his life, he thought pretty highly of himself. And back when he was in high school, the truth was he wasn't a very good student, but he thought he was pretty good. And he'd studied French, barely survived really. But he had one moment of glory. It was toward the end of his senior year, and he was sitting there in the French class, and the teacher, they called her Madame Fifette, because the teacher before, they'd called him Fifi, which was unkind. And when he was replaced with this woman, they called her Madame Fifette. Well, anyway, Madame Fifette had taken the opportunity. She wanted to teach her students about an expression in French that goes "Honi soit qui mal y pense," and she thought her students understood enough that French enough that they would be able to understand this. And she was explaining the whole history of mal y pense, "Honi soit qui mal y pense." And she was talking about the order of the garter, and well, as I say, Teydis was in the class, and he wasn't really paying all that much attention. He knew it was something about ordering garters or something like that, but she wanted to see if the students could pronounce that well, and well, Teydis, he was sitting there fantasizing about the Kropotkin twins, who were a lot younger than him, but in the high school class, and that's what his mind was on. So young and so sweet looking. So anyway, she was going around the room, and she wanted people to see what they could do with the French. It was written on the board there. And she called on Teydis. Well, Teydis, as I say, he'd been in this fantasy. And he looked at it, and he said, "Honey, soit qui meli pence." And they were aghast, or she was, and the students were too, because he was so far off. And she said, "Wow, I've never heard it pronounced like that before. Can you say that again?" And proudly he did. He said, Honi soit qui meli pence. And now the class all clapped. They were really impressed. And Madame Fifette, she said, "I'm going to have to give you some kind of an award for that. Some, what do they call it? Medal of Honor or something like that, because that was amazing pronunciation of French. I'm sure it's never been done like that before. Well, Teydis, of course, he thought, wow, I'm as good as I thought I was. And, he didn't understand what was going on. But he was so proud of himself. And afterward, he actually got a poster that had Honi, Soit, Malipon. Now, what it means is shame be to him who thinks it. And she'd explained all this, but he'd kind of missed it. But he got a poster and had it on the wall, and he decided he should probably learn what it says. And he looked up Honi Soit, although he thought it was honey sweet by that time, and looked and it said, shame be. He figured that's a way of saying, oh, that's such a shame. That's shameful. That's what he thought it meant. And so he was hearing these sounds, and his classmates even started calling him, or they'd use honey sweet. They made fun of him a little bit, and they called him Sweetie for a while, and he loved it. Well, anyway, that's what he mumbled to himself, honey sweet. Like, this is shameful, because he was thinking quite differently from the reality. And he thought to himself, there's a little girl down there. This is broad daylight. What's going on down there? And he listened a little closer, and he could hear the little girl, that's what he thought of Elaine, was saying, gee, Ma, that was really hard. Do you think it's always going to be that hard? And G-Ma said, I hope not, but we got to do a lot of this. And if it's really hard, that's the way we're going to deal with it. And, Teydis, he's wide-eyed. He better go get his cell phone. He better try to record what's going on here. This is broad daylight. So he was horrified, and once again he said, honey, sweet.